The 2023 NBA draft class has been very interesting so far. There's obviously a ton of talent, but a bunch of guys at the top haven't quite fulfilled that potential. There's some guys later that are much better, but of course, at the top, we have Victor Wembanyama. And if I'm going to go back and regrade any of these, of course, we have to start with an A++++ grade for San Antonio. They were never going to select anyone else. There was a little bit of buzz about, hey, Scoot Henderson, hey, Brandon Miller, but realistically, they were always going to go with Victor Wembanyama. Half the league, it felt like, was tanking to go and get this guy. And honestly, I think he's kind of surpassed expectations. I've talked a couple of times about how I didn't think that his offensive game was necessarily going to translate immediately. He's going to have to figure out his skill set, but defensively, everything was going to be there. And now this year, he's averaging like 25 points per game. He's shooting really well from three. And San Antonio's had to figure some things out with him, whether they play him full time at the 5, which they've now done. They didn't do that for the entirety of his rookie season. But I certainly don't think that we are very far away from Victor Wembanyama maybe being one of the 5 best players in the league, maybe being the best player in the league, being an MVP candidate. I don't think we're that far away from that. And he's like 20 years old. This is year 2. It's an A++ beyond everything grade. But you knew that. What about some of these other guys? Second overall is Brandon Miller going to Charlotte, and I gave them an A grade. One other thing to mention here as well is if they are within the top 10 of my redraft of this class, I'll put that on screen. Of course, Wemby goes first overall in a redraft. I have Brandon Miller at number 3, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. He's had a little bit of an up and down start to his career, but I still can see the vision of what Brandon Miller is going to be long term. If he gets better at attacking the rim, gets a little bit stronger, a lot of the in-between scoring stuff and the shooting stuff is definitely there, and him and LaMelo Ball are a formidable backcourt combination there in Charlotte, and given where they selected him, it's definitely a better pick than Scoot Henderson, who we're going to talk about in a second. And I say that as someone that was a Scoot Henderson guy that felt like Scoot should have gone second in the class. Brandon Miller has been much, much better than that, and I give them an A grade for that. Speaking of third overall, Scoot Henderson is an F grade. He is not in the top 10 of the redraft. This is something that has confused me more than almost any draft prospect ever. Scoot Henderson as a prospect, I felt like wasn't necessarily a can't-miss player as a guard, but if Victor Wembanyama wasn't in the class, I felt like he would have gone first overall. I felt like there were some other classes that maybe he would have gone first overall in the past, and it just has not happened. He showed up and then started wearing goggles because of an eye issue that he didn't have before. The aggressiveness getting to the rim is not there. The in-between game is not there. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it's a G League thing. I don't know if it's a lack of confidence thing, but Scoot Henderson is not good, and he has really not been good since he got to the league. It's still early. He can turn it around, but if you're looking at the talent behind him in this class, including a couple of guys that go obviously way ahead of him in a redraft, to pick him at third overall is not good. Blazers get an F. Next up now, though, is one of my favorite picks in the entire class, and someone that actually goes second overall in a redraft ahead of someone like Brandon Miller is fourth overall, Amen Thompson, going to the Houston Rockets. Of course, they get an A+ grade here. He's really come into his own this season after being used sparingly last year and then doing some small ball 5 stuff alongside Jabari Smith last year when Houston started playing really well towards the end of the year without Şengün. But he is an invaluable piece for Houston. I think long-term he's a starting piece when it's no longer maybe Jalen Green is gone or Dylan Brooks is gone. I think maybe eventually when they move on from Jabari Smith, Amen Thompson's ability defensively, his growing offensive game, his athleticism, his work on the boards, he is an unbelievable player and just going to be an awesome complimentary guy, especially if he can continue to work on his jump shot. If he doesn't, it's going to be a little bit more of like a better version of Aaron Gordon kind of thing. But when you're looking at that fourth in this class for a guy that was so raw, we didn't know what to expect from him coming out of the draft, that is awesome value for Houston. Really quickly though, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, PrizePicks. And with all the football going on right now that you can also combine with basketball, there's so much happening on PrizePicks. You can get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup when you use code SPORTING. That link is in the description. And you always want to keep an eye out for promotions on PrizePicks as well, whether it be Taco Tuesday, Flex Friday, discounted numbers. Always keep an eye out on PrizePicks. And the way this works is you just scroll through, look at all these numbers and try and figure out what you think is going to happen in a given game. And then you pick more or less for each of these numbers. And if you're correct, you win some cash. So for example, I can combine these playoff games here for football with some regular season games during the week with the NBA. And if I'm correct on more or less for each, then I win. So if I were you, what I would do is I would click that link in the description, get that $50 instantly when you place your first $5 lineup, and keep an eye out for these promotions on PrizePicks as well. And that way you've got a bunch of stuff to pay attention to while you're watching these playoff games. Again, check out that link in the description. Go have some fun on PrizePicks, and thank you again to PrizePicks for sponsoring this video. Next, we go to someone that is really hard to give a grade to right now. It's Asar Thompson, Amen's brother. I gave them a B+ grade just because we haven't seen that much of him. Had like a blood clot issue at the beginning of the season to really play. We just didn't really see him that much this season, and last year was a little bit up and down down as well. I still like the talent, and overall, I can't really give them too bad of a grade here, so I gave them a B+. Next is one that, honestly, I thought about giving an even higher grade to, and it is the Orlando Magic with Anthony Black. In a redraft, he goes 7th, but outside of the top couple of guys in the redraft, there's really not that much separation, and I gave Orlando a B+ grade. Honestly, I thought about giving them an A because I think Anthony Black's really good. He can guard, has great size. He's got to figure out the shooting stuff, but there's real playmaking stuff there. He can get to the rim a little bit as well. And I think long-term, he's going to be a really nice piece in Orlando or potentially a trade asset for them. And given how weird this part of the top 10 was after we pretty much knew who the top 5 was going to be, Thompson Twins, Brandon Miller, Scoot Henderson, and then of course Wemby at the top, I like the value there for Anthony Black. And I think when we grade this again in a couple of years, I wouldn't be surprised if he is higher than 7th in a redraft. Speaking of another guy that I really like, maybe more than some others, Washington goes with Bilal Coulibaly here. And in a redraft, I have him 10th. I honestly kind of want to put him higher, but again, it's just hard once you get outside of the top couple of guys in a redraft. But I gave Washington an A grade. This was definitely a little bit more out on a limb. They definitely took a little bit more of a risk here, and I think long-term Bilal is going to be really, really good. He's got to continue to get stronger, work on his offensive game, but they knew that when they brought him in. He wasn't even playing at very high levels of international basketball like a year prior to getting drafted, and now he has nights where he's scoring 20 points in an NBA game, and I really feel like the versatility on both ends of the floor, the skill set, he seems very fluid. I love the body control, all that stuff for Bilal Coulibaly. Love that pick for Washington. Again, I think he's going to be higher than 10th in a redraft here in a couple of years. Next, there's a couple of guys that are pretty difficult to grade. Honestly, it's Jarris Walker and Taylor Hendricks. I gave them both C grade. We haven't really seen a ton of either, and right when it felt like Taylor Hendricks was starting to come into his own, he had an injury issue. So right now it's a C. It's almost like a non-grade because it's just so early into their careers. At 10, though, we have technically Dallas, but then getting traded to OKC. Cason Wallace going to Oklahoma City, and I gave them an A grade here. Someone that I would like to have in the redraft, but again, there's just a bunch of guys. I don't have him there now, but I could easily be convinced to put him as high as like 7th in a redraft. Really nice complimentary player for Oklahoma City. Also landed in a perfect spot where he can just be allowed to grow into that role. There in OKC, he's going to continue to grow as a shooter. Really like him as a defender, and just a nice complimentary piece there for the Thunder. 11, unfortunately, Orlando doesn't do as well with their second lottery pick. It's Jett Howard. I gave them a D. It's kind of crazy that he still isn't really playing that much for them despite all of the injuries, and that just kind of tells me that they know maybe he's not that good. This one got criticized at the time of the draft because there were some other guys that they probably could have selected if they just wanted a wing that could guard and really, really shoot, but they certainly thought that he had way higher shooting upside than he has shown so far. Despite some flashes in Summer League, unfortunately, it looks like he's getting lapped by other guys like Tristan da Silva in that Orlando rotation, so probably not going to be a great pick long-term for Orlando. 12 now is Derek Lively for Dallas. I have him as 5th in a redraft, which means it is an A grade for me. Not a lot of people loved this pick for Dallas because Lively was such a polarizing prospect. Some people saw him as this super high upside, versatile defensive player that could also be a really nice rim roller. Others saw him as this guy that showed up as a highly touted prospect, didn't do that much in college, and was going to want to kind of do his own thing. And he's shown up to the league, been awesome defensively, great athleticism, great size, rim runner, everything you want out of a modern center that isn't a star. The Mavs have gotten that from Derek Lively. You'd like to see him continue to expand his role potentially long-term, maybe once they are done with Daniel Gafford, but great value there for Dallas. 13, Toronto goes with, I'm just going to call him Grady for the sake of not getting the video taken down and demonetized. Grady, who goes 4th overall in a redraft, which is not something I would have said a year ago. He basically didn't do anything as a rookie, at least not anything all that notable, and he's been awesome in year 2. This is an A grade for Toronto, someone that, again, I certainly did not expect, but he's got all these scoring skills all of a sudden. We knew he had great size and can shoot, but there's like attacking closeout stuff, working off multiple screens off the ball. He has been awesome in Toronto. 14 is a guy that I really liked prior to the draft that hasn't quite done everything I wanted him to despite some opportunity, and that is Jordan Hawkins in New Orleans. I ended up going with him as 6th in the redraft, but again, you could put Bilal Coulibaly there if you wanted to. You honestly could put Anthony Black there if you wanted to. The redraft gets a little bit weird. I gave them a B grade here because there's a couple of guys coming up that they could have gotten much better value out of, but that New Orleans situation is difficult to really carve a role out into because there's so many guys, so I don't really blame him for not being all the way up the way kind of I wanted him to be, obviously still early into his career. 15, Atlanta, Kobe Buffkin, F, has not made an impact, have not really noticed him at all, and again, a couple of guys here coming up that are very good, but there's also plenty of misses here in the late lottery and then the later half of the second round. 16, the Jazz get Keontae George. I went with an A because you kind of have to with how well his career's gone so far, but I wouldn't be surprised if long-term he's not actually that impactful. He can score, but he's also on a bad team, and he's getting a lot more minutes than maybe he would get on some of these other teams. I'm a little bit concerned about him long-term in terms of where he is 5 years from now in a redraft or with a grade, but I'm going to give Utah an A for how well he has started his career. 17, Jalen Hood-Schifino has done nothing for the Lakers. It is an F. And again, when you consider the next couple of guys here that are going to get picked and the value that you could potentially have in the first and maybe even on into the second round in this class, it has to be an F. 18, Jaime Jaquez. He was 9th in a redraft. I gave the Heat a B+ for that selection. Down year for him so far this year, kind of struggling to find his role, but an immediate impact rookie and someone that long-term, you just know if he stays in Miami, he's going to have a really, really nice career, continue to grow offensively, and certainly would have been a better pick for either the Lakers or Atlanta or Orlando, even all the way up at 11. All those teams certainly missed by letting Jaquez fall to 18. 19 now, a guy that would have been a better grade and obviously been in the redraft if it wasn't for how bad he's been this year. Brandon Podziemski, I gave the Warriors a B+ grade. Again, I still think that there's a lot to like there. You don't just play as well as he did as a rookie and then all of a sudden be bad at basketball. But obviously there's been some concerns this year with just the playmaking vision hasn't really been there as well. He hasn't been shooting the ball as well. Granted, he's had this injury and he's had to wear a mask and all these different things. And there's just been a lot of rotational issues in Golden State as well. And I'd still give them a B+ grade, but certainly a down year for Podziemski. 20, this was the big story of the draft at the time. Cam Whitmore falling all the way to 20. Some people thought he would be a top 5, top 7 pick, and he just fell because of injury issues, maybe some attitude concerns. I'm still going to give Houston a B+ because I think Cam Whitmore is incredibly talented, even though they've been playing him in the G League some. He hasn't really been able to find his way into the rotation in a very talented Houston rotation there. But I'm still going to give them a B+. I think long-term he's going to be good and certainly really good value at the 20th pick. So I did all of the top 20, but then there's some other guys that just really aren't worth mentioning. So I'm going to start skipping picks now. 25 now is Marcus Sasser, who ends up in Detroit. I gave them a B grade. I think he's going to be a fine rotation player. Can really shoot the ball, so I like that. 26, Ben Shepherd, pretty solid two-way player there for Indiana. I gave them a B. 29, Julian Strother, who ends up with the Nuggets. I gave them a B+. Even though their rotation obviously is young, they're having plenty of issues trying to find any kind of shooting. He's playing for them, and that to me means a lot in terms of how Denver views him. So I gave them a B+ grade. Now we move into the second round, which arguably is kind of the strength of this class. Andre Jackson, who ends up in Milwaukee, I gave Milwaukee an A grade. He's got a funky shooting form, but he's figured out a way to be at least semi-consistent offensively and has really been a big part of the turnaround in Milwaukee this year. Defensively gives them an athleticism and some juice that they desperately needed. This was a heavily criticized pick at the time, but ultimately it's worked out for Milwaukee. And if you're getting rotation players on a team that has title aspirations in the second round of a not overwhelmingly talented class, that's going to get you a good grade, so Orlando ends up with an A. 45 now is someone that I would put 8th in a redraft, and quite frankly, if you tell me that this guy is the 4th best player in the class a couple years from now, I would believe you. G.G. Jackson, who ends up with the Grizzlies. Of course, I give them an A+ grade here. He hasn't played this year as of the recording of this video due to a foot injury, but as a rookie with all the injuries in Memphis, he stepped up and looked like a real NBA player as the youngest guy in the league, as someone that's still trying to figure out what position he's supposed to play. He could shoot, got great athleticism, some on-ball scoring skills. G.G. Jackson is the hidden gem in this draft class, and I wouldn't be surprised if we're redrafting him in the top 5 of this class a couple years from now when I redo this video. 51 now, the Nets get Jalen Wilson. I gave them a B+ grade. I think he's going to be a solid rotation player for them moving forward. This was one that I think people were excited about at the time, and that has certainly come to fruition in Brooklyn. 52, the Suns go with Toumani Camara, but that actually gets traded to Portland, a player that Portland really wanted in the Damian Lillard trade, as of course the Suns were involved in that deal, and he's really, really good. Like, he's, again, just kind of a hidden gem in this class. I feel like people don't talk about a bunch. I gave Portland an A grade for this selection because I just think he's going to be really impactful defensively. He's got to figure out some stuff offensively, but at this late in the draft class to have as much of an impact as he has had through 2 years statistically and overall has been really, really nice to see. And then 57, Trace Jackson-Davis, who ends up in Golden State. They, of course, get a A+ grade from me. All the way this late in the draft, someone that starts for them sometimes brings them really nice energy. I really like Jackson-Davis. So the redraft is as follows. Victor Wembanyama, Amen Thompson, Brandon Miller, Grady, Derek Lively, Jordan Hawkins, Anthony Black, G.G. Jackson, Jaime Jaquez, and Bilal Coulibaly. A bunch of other guys certainly that could be there, but right now that is where I'm landing. It's a tough class to figure out. They've really just gotten their career started. The only things I feel super confident in are Wemby, Amen Thompson, and Brandon Miller at the top, and I can't wait to look back at this and maybe regrade these guys once again in a couple of years.